Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. And I named the series Honest Conversations in Ending Marriages, Relationships, and Having Children. And I have my guest here, ChristieLegal. Christy, happy March. Happy International Women's Day. That was March 8th and months. How are you doing?
Good. Yes, I'm very happy to be here and celebrating Women's History Month.
Yeah. So we decided to make this a monthly series. I could definitely do more, but I know you're very busy with, of course, your work. And as people can see, hopefully, we are talking about Women's History Month and trends in divorce. And our previous episode was called "The Most Important Decisions You'll Ever Make," and we focused on who you marry or who you have children with. Even if you don't marry, who you have children with can make and break you, the other person, and especially your children. And so that was the previous episode. And since it is March, we wanted to focus on women, trends in divorce, and especially related to women. And you and I live in the States, and it is a very it feels like we're not living in the States though, with all the things that are going on, especially towards women and laws that are being made f- for women.
Certainly. Yeah. And so in honor of Women's History Month, I want to just put out a few things that happened in the past, like that even though things seem to really fucking suck right now,
Hmm.
like it was really worse. and, um, and not saying I'm happy about how the it's going right now with women's rights, but let me just tell you a few things about women's history. Um, so let's see here. Um, do, 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 do. Um, Women obtained the right to vote in 1920 with the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution. So women were in the United States for like over 100 years until they had the right to vote. And at the same time that they were getting the right to vote, they were about 20% of the workforce. So they were allowed to work, but they weren't allowed to vote. So, the U.S. Equal Rights Amendment, which guarantees equal rights, equal pay, equal this, that, and the other thing to women, was introduced in 1923. It still hasn't been passed. In the 1930s, married women weren't allowed to work or they were discriminated against in the workforce. So, let's see. In 1945, the U.S. Congress, several members of the U.S. Congress proposed the Women's Equal Pay Act. It failed. In 1960, women earned 61 cents to a dollar that the man earned. In 2018, women earned 82 cents to a dollar a man would earn.
Hmm.
And now the wage gap is worse for women of color.
Hmm.
For Black women in the 1980s, that's the most recent statistics I have. I apologize. Or I'm sorry, 2018, excuse me. Black women were paid 62 cents to the man's dollar. Native American women, 57 cents to the man's dollar. Latina women, 54 cents to the man's dollar. And this is 2018 statistics, so fairly recent.
Hmm.
Now, President John F. Kennedy was a little better. In 1961, he created a special commission on the status of women and had Eleanor Roosevelt Charrett. Um, but nothing happened, though, unfortunately. In 1964, though, women gained protection against discrimination when the Civil Rights Act was passed. It prohibited employers from discriminating workers based on sex, race, religion, national origin. Birth control. Okay. So in 1965, the Supreme Court finally decided that married people can use birth control. Married people.
What year was this again?
1965.
That wasn't that long ago.
And it's only married people. And in 1972, the US Supreme Court finally decided that unmarried people can have birth control.
That was only 50 years ago.
Yep, that was the year before I was born. People finally got access to birth control. So, now, really cool, the National Organization of Women was formed by Betty Friedan and other feminists in 1966. The National Organization of Women still exists today. They are dedicated to ending sexual discrimination and establishing gender equality in the workplace. So there's just a little bit of women's history for everybody, in case you didn't know exactly how oppressed women were in the past.
Yeah.
And again, women of color were even more oppressed by discrimination.
Wow. So I may be going off script here. And, in 2025, a lot of young women are blaming feminism for how hard they have to work. And the rebuttal is that that's not feminism, that is forcing you to work. That's capitalism. And so a lot of young, when I say like teenage to early 20s who, want to have this life of being a stay-home influencer or, I blame feminism because it forced me to work. What would you say to that?
I don't know how my beliefs that women should be treated equally and have, if they want to, have well-developed careers and not do all the parenting. I honestly don't know how that makes anybody else work or honestly do anything. So, I mean, what's making women who don't want to work, have to work? Getting real here, okay?
This
Couple of
is what
things.
this episode is all about,
Let's
being
get
real.
real here. So a couple of things that I've seen in family law and just society in general that are making people have to work who don't want to work are they aren't partnering with people who can pay all the bills. They aren't partnering with people because, if you have children and you're not like partnered with someone, then you're not going to guarantee that your bills are paid. And so family law also, as of this year, at least in Minnesota, is moving towards no spousal maintenance. So be a stay-at-home mom or a trad wife or traditional wife at your own risk, because right now, already for 2025, the length of spousal maintenance has been dramatically reduced. And the trend is that eventually no one will get spousal maintenance. Well, and with extreme limitations, practically no one will get spousal maintenance for more than a couple of years.
Wow.
And You cannot, if you are in an abusive relationship, or, you know, you just married someone who's really actually isn't good for you and you decide to divorce, you are going to only be able to count on them supporting you for like 2 years or so. And I don't know the laws in other states, but Minnesota tends to be the most liberal financially
Mhm.
and socially state, or one of the most liberal. So I have to think the other states are being even more restrictive of spousal maintenance. So, totally be a traditional wife if you want to. And if that makes you happy, and if your husband goes along with it,
Mhm.
or yeah, like, it's a great thing. Like, people don't have to work. You don't have to want a career. Like, but just know the costs of that decision. Um, you know, you're financially dependent on someone.
Mhm.
When you are financially dependent on someone, you put yourself at risk of being abused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So gone are the days of having spousal support until so what if you have young children though? What if you have young children? Does that go into consideration, or is that just child support until they're 18?
Yep.
Or is there anything else that if there's divorce that the mother or the ex-wife would get besides
Nope.
child support?
Yep, it's just child support, and there's a calculator, and it's based on, how much the parties earn. And it will, so I advise my clients, suggest that my clients reevaluate the
Mhm.
child support every year,
Yeah.
because things change.
Mhm.
And so, in all honesty, the child support's probably not going to pay for everything.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, for the first couple of years, there'll be child support
Mhm.
and spousal maintenance, both of them. And so, someone probably won't have to work, but then when the
Mhm.
spousal maintenance drops off.
Okay, so spousal maintenance, like, what does that exactly mean? And does that mean that moving forward, it's only about child support if you have children?
Yeah, so spousal maintenance is money paid by the spouse who earns more money, um, uh, to the spouse who either doesn't earn money or earns very little money. It's usually when the other spouse is working not at all or part
Mhm.
time, and and if the other spouse, has a college degree or used to have a professional job, then the length of the spousal maintenance is shorter, because that spouse has the ability to restart a decent paying career more quickly, because they have a college degree and had a professional job in the past. There are a lot of factors that are taken into consideration when determining spousal maintenance, and there is no formula. So it's
Mm.
really the Wild West. Um, and so normally the parties, either one of two things: either the parties, kind of agree on how much the spousal maintenance payment's going to be and for how many years, or folks lawyer up, I mean, and hire an attorney to give them an opinion on what the spousal maintenance payment would be. And then litigation happens, and the judge determines the spousal payment amount and length of time. And honestly, the judge has a lot of judicial discretion. So even the attorneys can't really tell you how much it's going to be or for how long. So, which to me is kind of stressful. Um, and so spousal maintenance is not something that a traditional wife is going to be able to rely on long term. Normally, It's like I said, just going to be a couple of years, especially moving forward. Um, and so after the couple of years, there's child support. And child support, as a rule of thumb, is like about 20 to 30% of the payor's gross income, which means income before taxes. However, if the payor is paying for medical and dental insurance, the person gets a credit for that. So it's not, just, 25% of the gross income. And then, to balance that out, he compares how much income the other parent is receiving. And, you know, you will eventually have to start to work when the spousal maintenance drops off. Most people cannot live on just the child support unless the payor, earns say, I don't know, $15,000 a month. And, so you're getting $4,000 a month in child support, and, you live a modest life. That would work. But I mean, there aren't a lot of people who, earn $15,000 a month. And because that would be what, I don't know, well over $100,000 a year. Um, and, and also something to take into consideration is that when the payor is no longer, you folks are no longer sharing a household, and the payor doesn't have you to rely on to take care of everything at home and do all the child care, the payor might work fewer hours because he needs time to do all the house stuff, and needs time to parent the children during his parenting time. And so he might actually work a little bit less. Like, he might have been working a bunch of overtime, but he can't work a bunch of overtime, when he actually needs to parent and take care of a house and all that. Or maybe he had, a really top executive role, and now he's like, wow, I can't be jet setting all over the world and blah, 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 because I want to spend time with my kids. And now I have to do more to spend time with my kids. So the payor's income could go down, which means your spousal maintenance is going to go down and your child support is going to go down. And yeah, a lot of new laws about spousal maintenance have taken effect in 2025. So expect that you're gonna eventually be working.
What do you think that is? All these changes, what do you think occurred, or what do you think this is all about?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, because I do belong to a couple of fathers' rights groups, and I've read things from people who belong to men's rights groups that men are sick of having to pay for their ex-spouse to live after the marriage. And men still do have more power in government and politics.
I was gonna say politicians are the ones in power, the ones who are men, and are probably like, "Hey, I got divorced and I want to change this law. Let's be real."
Yeah. So, warning traditional wives, you might be doing, everything, to make your husband's life easier right now, but it doesn't mean that he is going to make your life easier in the future.
Say that again. Say that again.
Warning traditional wives. You might be doing everything you can to make your husband's life easier now, but he might not do things to make your life easier in the future.
That was a very powerful statement right there.
Yep. And when you go back into the workforce, like 5 or 10 years later, you're going to be behind in your skill set, and your employers or prospective employers are going to be like, you have a gap in your resume. What is that about? So, I mean, and there are absolutely men who, absolutely want a traditional wife, and to do everything that way. But 60% of first marriages, 70% of second, and 80% of third marriages end in divorce. So it doesn't, bode well for the marriage lasting.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is not to scare anybody who wants to get married. This is the reality, and numbers don't lie.
Yep. There can be awesome marriages. I was married before, I'm widowed, and I'm engaged. I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
married next June.
Mm-hmm.
So marriage is a wonderful thing to the right person.
Right, to the right person, to the right person. And what you said right there about the skill set, and things are moving so fast right now that if you're out in the workforce even like a year or two, i- i- and you're competing against young new graduates who are on the top, who know like technology, who know AI, all of that. I mean, even as a self-employed person who has been out of the game since 2022, I feel like I don't know what goes on in corporate culture anymore. Like what's going on? And I'm still working, and I can't imagine if you've been out, not you, but a woman or a man who chooses to to be staying home and be with their skill sets, like their skill sets. And so when you're raising children, the last thing you're worried about is your work skill set.
Yep. But you should be worried about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You should be
So,
worried about it, but you're so busy with children that you're like, that's the last thing I want to think about.
yeah. And so let's talk about trends in divorce,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about
because
trends and
we're,
divorce.
we're telling everybody, like, don't get too comfortable in this, traditional wife life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now let's give them some information about why they don't want to get too comfortable.
Right. Right. And again, our intention is not to fearmonger anyone who wants to be a stay-home wife, a stay-home parent, whatever. It's just saying that always have a backup plan. Always have backup plan. Always have a plan B, C, D, because sometimes plan A doesn't work out.
Right.
And again, a lot of people, you and I discussed this in all of our previous episodes, a lot of people think they are the exception. And when you are not the exception, unfortunately, you learn the hard way. And so this is just saying again, you're not the exception. You may have everything right. I see so many women say, well, my husband would never do that to me. I'm so glad your husband won't do that to you today. But what what if something else happens? Don't be blindsided. Do not be blindsided. And so this is to, not fearmonger, but to have plan B, C, D, and to plan and say, what if this were to happen for me? And like you said, you were married once. Did you plan to be a young widow?
No, no way. Nope.
Mhm.
Boy, did it turn my life upside down.
Right. And I remember you saying, I intentionally planned so that I did not become a single parent.
Amen.
And
And I still am.
and you still were a single parent. And so this is just to teach and educate and say, if that were to happen to you, what are your options? How do you plan for this? And so this is the intention of this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. I never intended to be a widow. And I was with my late husband for 17 years, but it ended. Just like people's marriages end from divorce. And both are huge transitions financially, socially, emotionally, everything. Um, and so let's talk a little bit about trends for divorce in America.
Yeah.
So Paia forwarded to me a CBS Sunday morning news segment from February that said that divorce decreased in the United States from 2012 to 2022. Um, I find that extremely interesting because I was just incredibly busy during the COVID pandemic. Like you'd think that, people were given free divorces or something. Um, like so it's I was just, busier than I had ever been, and I've been doing this work since 2013.
Mhm.
And I have um for the most part continued to be busier than I was before the pandemic. So
Mm.
I I am not sure about that it has decreased. Maybe
Mhm.
it's decreased in some parts of the country or something like that, or yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I will link that episode down in the description box too, um, so that people can watch. And so you feel that it's the opposite, that divorces has actually gone up, especially since COVID.
Yeah, well, so during like right after COVID, it really spiked and then it got back to normal. But I was told by multiple psychologists and other sources that since maybe like 2015 or so, that the divorce rate for first marriages went up to 60%. I had thought it was 50,
Yeah.
but I was informed it's 60% for first marriages. So I don't know. Maybe it went down
Mhm.
back to 50%. Maybe that's what happened. But yeah.
People are getting married less now too. Do you think that has something to do with the stats or no?
Oh, well, so maybe it did go down to 50% because, yeah, fewer people are getting married, especially, people under the age of, say, 40.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, yeah, obviously, with fewer people marrying, there are going to be fewer marriages that don't work.
Mhm.
And and then like just the whole like, women don't think that they have to marry anymore, and women growing up seeing their mothers in bad relationships and saying, I'm not going to do that.
Who
Um,
stayed in bad relationships.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, that's probably why, that there are fewer people marrying and then fewer people divorcing.
Mhm.
They're being more informed. Like, even when I was a young person, I'm 52.
Mhm.
Um, it was kinda like, "Well, of course you're gonna get married." And now it's more like, "Eh."
Mhm. Right, right. And so you're from that Gen X generation. I know a few Gen X women too who explain that that generation was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was expected to get married and have a family. Do you feel like that your generation, especially the women, that was the expectation?
Yeah, yeah, yep. And, I mean, I was fine with that because I did want that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, not everybody does, but
Mhm.
and so some things that we need to really pay attention to, about divorce is that there are people who are trying to eliminate or restrict divorce. Um, so, an attorney to the rich and famous named Robert Stephen Cohen
Mhm.
actually said in that same CBS Sunday morning news
Mhm.
thing that people shouldn't be allowed to get divorced. And when he said that, I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Um,
Right. Are you fucking kidding me?
and he makes tons of money off of people divorcing.
Yeah.
So, like, what would happen if people weren't allowed to get divorced? Oh, well, obviously, there'd be more abuse. Because if you can't get away from your abuser, there's going to be no reason that person's ever going to stop. And just like women are going to, end up like doing, most of the housework unless they, marry a man who is of the mind that he's an adult too. He can be,
We both laugh at that.
you know, like, because I mean, it's obvious what they do is, I mean, you don't even actually have to be an adult. I did chores
No.
as a child.
Right, right. We all did chores as a child. And do you think if this attorney had been a woman, would she have said the same thing?
I don't know. And I'm forgetting all the reasons that Robert Stephen Cohen has said this.
Mhm.
But I remember one of the reasons that he said is that divorce is super expensive. Um, but I've heard a lot of people, men and women, say to me, I spent a lot of money to get divorced, and it was the best money I ever spent.
Mhm. It's an investment.
Yeah, it's an investment in your mental health.
Maybe, and this is controversial, maybe instead of not getting divorced, maybe people shouldn't get married in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if 60% of first marriages end in divorce, that's not a very good statistic.
Mhm. And so it's not divorce's fault, it's marriage's fault. Don't get married. Maybe
Yeah,
not get married so you won't have to get divorced.
exactly. Yeah, I've had actually a lot of people say, what do you think? Because of all the people you've divorced and all the stuff you've seen, what do you think is,
Mhm.
is the key to not getting divorced? And I very seriously say, don't get married.
Mhm.
And I laugh a little bit because I'm a little
It's
weird, but
true though. It's true. And people don't do you feel like people don't I don't want to say people don't take marriage seriously. I don't think people know themselves enough to get married. That's such the psychotherapist in me. What would you say as someone who does this kind of work?
well, yeah, that's definitely it. The people don't know themselves very well. And then the other part is they don't know the other person very well.
Mhm.
Like they don't really dig deeply into who that person is. They don't even know the person for very long. Or they know the person, but they don't really have deep conversations
Mhm.
and they don't observe the person. They're
Mhm.
just kind of like, I don't know. I'm not sure what people are doing, but they're not doing enough.
They're not doing enough, and a lot of it is based on physical attraction, and I get that. You have to be attracted to the person you're with, but attraction can only get so far.
Oh, hallelujah.
And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people base their relationship is the attraction. And I'm gonna say this in America, Western world, people jump into bed way too quick, and then they form a relationship and attachment not even liking the other person. A lot of people are together and don't even like the other person. And a lot of people don't think that
Really?
makes
Yeah, I
sense,
didn't know that.
but like they don't even like that other person.
Wow. Okay. I mean, so now some of the people who I've divorced make sense. But I actually didn't know that people would partner up and then maybe even get divorced, I mean, married and not actually like the other person.
It doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make sense, but
Wow.
some people don't like who they are with and they're just with that person
Hmm.
because that person gives them something in return.
Mm, yeah. That part I can understand, using psychology. Yeah.
And
That's very, very unfortunate.
again, I've worked with people like that
Yeah.
in therapy, and it's like, what are you even with this person for? It's not fair for you or them.
You're right.
Yeah, it's not
Absolutely.
fair, and you're just tag them along, or sometimes this person is the placeholder for them until they can find somebody better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is super unfair. I've seen a lot of people treat people like that, and, you know, that is very unfair. Both men and women doing
Both
that.
men and women, it doesn't matter what you identify with. I see a lot of that, especially in therapy, and it's not fair. And it's, you're giving the other person hope. And sometimes the relationship is complacent, but neither party are willing to leave or go because it's too much work.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And to bring it back to divorce,
Hmm.
there are already some parts of society that are making it more difficult to get divorced. So, in several southern states of the United States, you have to file for divorce, then you have to live separately for an entire year, and then you can proceed with a divorce. What this does is it makes it impossible for people who don't earn enough money to divorce. Unless maybe they have like a parent or somebody who they can live with for a year.
Hmm.
Because think about it. If you're barely making it, on your two incomes in one house, how are you going to make it on those incomes in two houses?
Hmm.
You're not.
You're not. You're not. And if you have kids,
And another thing in California and other states as well, you don't have to live separately for a year, but you file for divorce and then you have to wait 6 months to do anything. And let me tell you,
California?
yeah, in right. I was like, seriously? I thought that's a liberal state, right?
Right. Yeah.
Confusing.
Hmm.
But I know somebody who is currently getting divorced in California, and she told
Okay.
me this, and I was like, all right then. So, so what the government is essentially saying is you are not competent to make this decision, so we're going to give you 6 more months to think about it. And, you're going to have to be really uncomfortable for the next 6 months living with someone possibly who you do not get along with. And so, again, it's going to discourage people from filing for divorce.
I feel like this is such punishment. It's like we're going to punish you.
Mhm.
We're going to punish you to make sure that you really want this. Like, we're going to punish whoever it is and make sure that we deprive you of all your resources, your children's resources, so that you stay together.
Mhm. And I don't know about you, Paella, but when people contact me to get divorced, they very, very much know, like 95% of them very much know that they want to get divorced.
Hmm.
At least half of them have gone to counseling.
Hmm.
All of them have tried to communicate with the other spouse about their unhappiness.
Hmm.
Um, at least 25% of the women are being domestically abused, physically or mentally or both.
Hmm.
So they very much know that they want to get divorced. They
Hmm.
don't need a waiting period. They don't need to think about it. Most people who file for divorce think about it for at least a couple of years. So this legislation in the southern states and in California and probably in other states that I just don't know about
Hmm.
is just very ill-informed.
Yeah. I'm kind of processing, so that's why I'm taking moments of like some silence here. And to me, it reminds me of a child. You know how a child, it's like you take a moment to think about what you did.
Oh, yeah.
It's like being an errant child, and the law is the
Yeah.
parent. You go think about what you did.
Yeah. That's a
You
really
have
good point.
6 months to think about this, to see if you really want this, to do this or not. And in the term, like, we're gonna ground you and make your life miserable.
That's a really good point.
Hmm.
That's why you're the psychologist.
I'm the therapist, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
therapist and
And
life
so
coach.
there is. It's like the parentism of what the law is doing, and
Yeah.
there's protection. You're right. Like abuse. 25. You mentioned 25% that women are in abusive relationship, and it's not just physical, emotional, financially, and that takes a toll on your mental health. And the law is saying, you know what? Keep at it. Keep at it.
Yeah, it's honestly should be a crime.
Really
And
should be.
another fun thing that's going on with divorce, um, is that some states, you have to choose if you want a no-fault divorce or a fault divorce. And whoever files for divorce gets to pick. So a no fault divorce means that you're just saying, like, we don't want to talk about why the marriage is ending. We just want to end it. Or if it's, one person filing for divorce, I just want to end it, but I don't want to talk about why it's ending. We just don't get along anymore. Now, fault divorce is, you know, I want to talk about why this marriage is ending. And there are like when you want to file for a divorce based on fault, there are only certain things or reasons that you can file. And so those include adultery, abandonment, someone going to prison, um, physical inability to have sexual intercourse. Um, yeah, I was like, well, that's interesting. Infliction of emotional and physical and/or physical pain and substance abuse. Um, and so it's like, okay, like let's just make this whole divorce thing even harder. And so, so how I see this, because this isn't how it is in Minnesota. Like you don't even do that in Minnesota. So in the states where this is possible, how I see this playing out is abuser files for divorce. And
Hmm.
then abuser says, oh, yeah, we're going to do an at fault divorce. And then I'm going to say that you committed adultery. And because, you left the family home because you're afraid for your emotional and or physical safety. You
Hmm.
abandoned me. And, and you're on drugs. Yeah. What do you think about that, Paya?
I feel like this is all a plan to hurt women. And I'm not trying to say, oh, it's only women, but I really feel that this is power and control to keep women in marriages that are not good for them mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, is to really, again, it's like you think about this. You think about this, we're going to make everything hard on you to make sure that we take away all your resources, all your support to make it so hard for you that it's just easier for you to stay. And if you're a woman who doesn't have resources, you will stay. You will stay. And
Yeah.
it's to keep women trapped.
Especially if you have kids, because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, well, my kids need to eat. My kids need a place to live.
Mhm. And most mothers would do everything and anything for their children. And that includes putting themselves in harm's way to keep them protected.
Yeah. And because I cannot see any abused woman choosing the at fault divorce,
Mhm.
because the abused woman is not going to want it to be out in public that she was abused.
Yeah.
most of the time,
Most of them.
a long time. And, especially, after the divorce, maybe, but
Mhm.
not during the divorce, because when you want to get divorced, you want to like keep things like as calm as possible so we can get through this divorce process as quickly, easily, and affordably as possible. And throwing out I've been abused is not going to accomplish that any of those goals.
Mhm.
So the abused person is not going to be like, yeah, let's have an at fault divorce and I'm going to prove that you are abusive and I'm going to prove this, that, and the other thing. Plus,
Mhm.
proving that requires proof. And unfortunately, I have come into contact with a lot of usually women who have no proof of the abuse. They did not call the police. They did not get photographs taken by unbiased people. Um, Sometimes photographs that you take yourself, if they're time and date stamped, and you keep like a log or a journal of everything that's happened, and
Mhm.
then other people can back you up and write affidavits or testify in court. Sometimes that will work, but really, what is going to work best is you call the police document things. That's what's going to work best. Also, telling your medical care provider or your mental health care provider about the abuse will also be really good proof.
Mhm.
But if you are a victim of domestic abuse, you have to have proof. And if you have proof, then in most states, and I know in Minnesota, you can get a reduced cost or free attorney to help you with your divorce. But you have to have proof.
And I know in working with clients who have been abused, that is the last thing on their mind is I need to find proof. I need to find proof. I need to document all this. That is the last thing on their mind.
Because they're just trying to survive, right?
They're just trying to survive. They're trying to say, how do I not make this happen again? How do I not make this happen again? What did I do to have this happen to me? I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I will also include resources again in the description box for anybody who is needing help with like domestic abuse or resources that can help if you are being abused or looking to divorce. So Christie's information will be in the description box too.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. What other trends are occurring in 2025 related to divorce?
So, this isn't so much a trend, but kind of like a warning that was also in that CBS Sunday morning news segment from February. But I've heard many, many counselors, therapists, psychologists, um, and myself talk about, and that is a long term committed romantic relationship requires good communication, meaning frequent communication, open and honest communication. And if you don't have that, like your marriage is not going to last. It's not going to last. You have to every day, talk about life, talk about the kids, and if they're stepkids, you have to be able and willing to do that. Um, or it is just not going to work. Um, the the news report talked about a married couple who are in their 50s and they have thought about divorcing, and they have a
Mhm.
podcast and it's called Marriage and Martinis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Marriage and Martinis is their podcast.
Okay.
And during their podcast, they talk about the daily struggles of maintaining a good marriage and
Mhm.
long term relationship. And they actually use their own life and
Mhm.
they will sit there and discuss and sometimes kind of argue about things.
Mhm.
But in their podcasts, they constantly talk about that you need to communicate daily and openly and honestly to prevent problems from
Mhm.
spinning out of control.
Mhm.
Like no relationship is perfect,
Yeah.
because no one is perfect. And then you combine two unperfect people together and you have like more imperfectness. And so it's like, it's not going to be perfect.
No.
But with frequent, open, and honest communication, um, you can possibly deal, with all the things that come up. Um, but the problem with all of this is that nobody can make their spouse or partner communicate daily, openly, and honestly.
Mhm.
And so that's the problem. One person can be like the best communicator in the universe, and the other person, not so much.
And if you're the one doing all the communication, at some point you can be resentful. I'm doing all the work. What are you doing?
Yep.
Mhm.
And then going along with your theme of I'm doing all the work.
Mhm.
So we were earlier talking about the statistic that has existed since the 1980s and maybe even before that. I had first read this statistic in, I think, about 1992 when I was in college the first time. And that is that in order of happiness in American society,
Mhm.
married men are at the top. And then it is single women. And then it is single men. And then it's married women.
And this was from 1992, you said?
Yeah, and so the
Mm.
statistic was probably from the 80s, and I
Okay.
learned it in 1992, and I kept checking on it, and it keeps being the same.
Does that surprise you?
Well, not anymore.
Mhm.
Like when I read that in the 90s, I was like, "What? Are you kidding me?" I was like, I thought, at least some marriages. Like I hadn't seen very many good marriages. I'm not gonna lie. When I
Mhm.
was in college, in the early '90s, I hadn't been witness to too many good marriages. Um, but the ones that I was witness to that were good were very good,
Mhm.
and so I was really surprised that married
Mhm.
men are the least happy people in our society. Um,
'Cause
yeah,
we've been sold this fantasy that once you got married as a woman, your life was going to be so happy. And then when you actually get married, you're like, "Oh, what's going on?" And so I think that study probably was very surprising, especially in the 90s, because we were told married women are really happy, that once you get married, everything you're gonna be so happy, the fairy tale. And it's like, where's the freaking fairy tale? Why am I so damn tired? There was
yeah,
actually a recent study done like in 2019 and 2020 by some British researcher who I'll try to link that article to, where he's like, you know what? The happiest now in modern day 2020, 2025, unmarried child-free women are the happiest, and then married men are also the happiest. Those are the two subgroups that are the happiest.
yeah. Yep,
And I'm
so
not
it's still the
surprised.
same still the same now, right?
Mhm. I think now it's just people are talking more about it.
Yeah,
Married women are talking more about it, and it's not such a taboo topic anymore. They are coming out and saying, "Don't believe the fairy tale. We are doing all the emotional, physical work. We're expected to work also and do everything like our mothers did too, and it's not for us anymore." And if we don't have a partner who actually shows up mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, then we don't need this because we're already doing that ourselves, that we don't need that other person to add on to our responsibilities.
Oh, yeah. I have had lots of clients, actually both male and female,
Mhm.
but mostly female, who have said, "Oh, it's nice to only have 2 children instead of 3," post-divorce.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to make you almost choke on your drink.
I know. And
I
that's
should have saved
true.
the joke for until, like, after you had swallowed.
Head, right, yeah, and, I've mentioned this too. I used to be a caregiver social worker, and, um, the caregivers, 90% were women, would kinda joke and say, "Ha, ha, ha, I only had 2 children, but now I have 3, ha, ha, ha," and it's a joke, but they feel it. Like, that's how they coped with it, by making it a joke.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
And it is wonderful when they only have 2 children instead of 3.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, and so, if you are in a situation where your, partner or spouse just doesn't wanna communicate frequently, openly, and honestly, and you've been trying, for, like, at least several months, probably longer. It's just
Probably
not gonna get
years.
better. Yeah, probably years.
Mhm.
It's just not gonna get better because, um, if you know, bugging the person hasn't worked, it's not gonna work.
It's not gonna work.
People do things because they want to do them.
Mhm. If they really want to, they will. Just remember that if they really wanted to, they will.
And, if your relationship is not gonna improve, then you owe it to yourself, and if you have kids, your kids, to leave the relationship.
Mhm.
You deserve better, your children deserve better. They deserve to know what a good romantic relationship looks like.
What a healthy relationship is, and what it means to be healthy for yourself too.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because, Paya obviously can talk about this better than I can. I just know from personal experience that, children learn in their childhood behavior patterns and thoughts that do not easily go away as adults.
Mhm.
And so when you're allowing your kids to grow up in a toxic or abusive environment, they are going to bring that right into their adulthood, and they're going to, go one of two ways. They're either going to be the exact opposite and like really, live a very sensible life, making, really good
Mhm.
decisions. Um,
Mhm.
or they're going to follow in the path
And
and,
continue the trauma and the curses.
yep.
Mhm.
And is that what you want for your kids?
Right. Right. And by you accepting, you're teaching your children that it's okay to accept too.
Yep.
Yeah. I always say try to be better for yourself. And some people say I need to be better for my children. And I don't have children, Christy. And so with me, I would say I would be better for myself. And Christy, for you who has children, what would you say? Would you be better for yourself or would you be better for your children?
Well, I would choose to be better for myself.
Mhm.
Some people need somebody else to be better for
Mhm.
whatever reason. You know probably why I don't. And but for people who, need a reason, that's honestly why when I am talking to victims of domestic abuse, if they don't talk about children, I'll ask if they have children. And if
Mhm.
they do, then I'll start to be like, well, do you really want your children to grow up in an environment like this? And
Mhm.
I'll start emphasizing the children. And because, some people, I guess maybe it's self-esteem or
Mhm.
self-worth, they can't do tough things just for themselves. And so,
Yeah, they need external motivation. Um, you always think as, okay, I'm not a parent again. And so you always hear people who are parents say, I will die for my children. I will die. I will do this. How will you survive for them?
how
How
about
will
you
you
thrive?
survive? Yeah. How do you like survive and thrive for your children instead of die for your children?
Exactly.
They need you
Yeah.
to survive and thrive, not die for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, depending on what type of family you come from, too, you might have a lot of preconceived ideas about,
Mhm.
divorce or, not being partnered with the father of your children, even if you're not married.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I didn't grow up with really much negative connotation of divorce, but in all honesty, I didn't, until I mean, actually, my mom did divorce my father, but it wasn't like, I guess I really didn't think about it as a kid.
Mhm.
And there weren't a lot of divorced people around me. But then, if you grow up in a really strict Christian family, or if you come from a culture where divorce is
Mhm.
really frowned upon.
Like mine.
And so, um, like, it's just infinitely harder to do
Mhm.
things. But that is okay because, you are going to find new friends and family
Mhm.
um, in your new culture that
Mhm.
you create, right, Paya?
Right. Right. And if anybody tries to make you stay, they're not the family for you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even God does not want us to suffer. Um,
No.
God did not create us to suffer. Um, for people who are Christians, yes, you know, in the Bible we are not supposed to get divorced, but being married,
Mhm.
even in the Bible, is based on love and caring.
Mhm.
When you're not, when the other person is not being loving and caring, then they are actually breaking the marriage vow.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 What do you think people should take away from this episode?
All right. So, um, what I want you to take from what we have talked about today is um, that women have come a long way.
Mhm.
Um, I want to do the Rosie the Riveter. We've come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
We've come a long way,
I can't
baby.
you guys can't see, but yeah.
And so we've come a long way.
Yeah.
Things are People are trying to pull us in.
Trying to backpedal us because of their
Yeah.
inferiority and, their, insecurities.
Yep. And them wanting things to be the way they always were.
Right.
The not so good old days.
Yeah. The
And
not so good
so
old days. Old
and so,
days.
like, if you're in a community
Mhm.
where your rights are being backpedaled, maybe you need to move to another community.
Mhm.
Like, um, and if you're in a relationship where, your rights are not being protected, maybe you need to get out of that relationship,
Mhm.
be it a marriage or just a dating relationship.
Mhm.
Um, and then also know that when you get married, um, and if you're a traditional wife, there's no guarantee that you are going to have a paycheck for the rest of your life if you divorce. And the next thing that I'd like you to take away is that there are lots of groups of people within society who already have limited people's ability to divorce. by having waiting periods and having to live separately for a year, and um, one party being able to choose that, oh, we're getting an at fault divorce, and we're pointing fingers and having to prove things that were wrong. Um, and so, because of that if you do get married, you might be in a situation in certain states where you're going to have to go through even more to get divorced. So think about getting married and think again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are actually trying to make it so difficult to get divorced that some people are trying to make it so you just can't get divorced anymore.
Yeah.
So think about that when you are getting married. Think about, like, as if there was no way out, would you still want to get in that marriage?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the takeaways.
Right. And again, Christy and I are very unromantic. We know, we know. And we are part of the cleanup crew. So, as part of being a cleanup crew, we have to be honest. We have to be honest. We're not here to dash away your dreams. We're not here to, you know, um, we're not bitter. We're not angry. We're not here to say, we're not here to, take away your dreams. Definitely have your dreams and still be cautious, still be informed, still be educated, and always have plan B, plan C, plan D.
Absolutely. And if you want, like some romantic stuff, I suggest Luther Vandross.
Luther Vandross, okay?
He's my favorite old school R&B singer.
Yeah, who
I
doesn't
totally
love
suggest
Luther,
him.
right?
So I know romantic too.
We're going to the 90s, right?
Yeah.
90s R&B.
But you need to base your decisions on who you marry and who you have kids with on more than romance.
Mhm. Right.
Lots more.
Lots more, and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and when you put in the right effort and are aware, I think the investment is worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Um, a good marriage is absolutely your best asset.
Mhm.
That person can help you grow as a person, or grow your business, or grow your social network. Like,
Mhm.
it's wonderful and amazing.
Mhm.
But
Right.
if you put the work into thinking about whether or not you should marry or have children with someone, and then you find out, whoa, no, that's a bad idea, then that's worth it too.
Mhm.
Because it
Mhm.
doesn't screw up your life.
Right. Right. Every investment um comes with risks and gains. And you have to figure out what is the risk and what is the gain.
Yeah.
It sounds so businessy, but marriage is a business.
Oh, yes, girl. Did you know that originally, I just read this lately. I forgot to bring this up before.
Mhm.
Marriage contracts originally had no emotion, like getting married, period, was
Mhm.
completely emotionless.
Yeah.
And it was literally a property contract
Mhm.
of, like the bride's family giving the bride to the groom, and then the groom getting something in return from the bride's family. It was all about economics. There
Right.
was
It's about economics,
no
assets.
love.
Right. And the concept of marrying love is actually really new. It's really new, and some people. This is gonna sound awful, and I'm just repeating what I heard. People say, "Love is for poor people." It's like marrying for love is poor people because rich people married for assets and status, like what you were talking about. And then poor people married for love. And I was like, this is what they said about history. I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Sense because marriage is all about assets and marrying the right bloodline so that it was about legacy. actual legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's marrying me for legacy. I really I really don't think so. Or money either.
Right. And so, yeah. And so, like, a lot of people married for legacy. That was the whole point, is to
Yeah.
have assets, generational wealth, instead of, just being, oh, we're going to marry for love. Love is a really new concept in marriage.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, it's consistent with the fact that, women, couldn't even have a bank account until
Right.
1968. Like, can you believe that?
That was
Like,
not that long ago.
I mean, you couldn't even have a bank account, and then I think it was in the 1980s that a woman could get either, like, a home mortgage or a business loan.
Hmm.
The 1980s.
That's when I was
So,
born.
so it's like
That
women
wasn't
had
that
to
long
partner
ago.
up. They had to partner up or they had no economic identity.
Power. Yeah. And that's why it's so important for women right now, especially young women, to realize how much of the feminist movement, how older generations really fought for us, like us millennials and Gen Zs who are saying, well, I have to work now. I blame feminism. No, feminism gives you the choice to even bitch and complain about this right now. Without
Exactly.
feminism, you would not get to bitch and complain that you're tired.
Right, right. You wouldn't
Hmm.
have that credit card to go out and buy the things you want.
Right. Yeah. You would have to rely on a male relative for all of that.
Yeah.
So, think feminism, think Women's History Month, think International Women's Day. And I know that is an ongoing fight, and we are progressing, and yet we are still fighting. We're still fighting for this. And for anybody who is saying feminism is causing more havoc or whatever, the fact that you even have an opinion is is thank you to feminism.
Yep.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's my soapbox.
But you're right.
That's my soapbox. It's because I grew up in a culture that was very, very trying to oppress women. And so when you don't have rights and you have rights now, you appreciate it. And I think when you grew up with all the advantages, you don't realize how lucky and how blessed you are until you don't have it.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah. Any final words, Christy, before we end this episode?
Think again and think again.
Hmm. Think again and think again. And yeah, I'm gonna put all the resources that Christy talked about. I have all her information. If you are interested in working with her or having a free consultation with her, all her information will be in the description box. So if you like this episode, or if you're new, please hit the like and subscribe button. And Christy and I are hoping to make this a monthly thing. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So reach out to Paia and tell her if
Yeah.
there's some like divorce, child custody thing you want to talk about.
Right. If you're watching this and you have anything that you would like for Chris and I to talk about, definitely put that in the comment box, and we will look at this. We love this. Again, I know Chrissy is busy, and if we could do more of this, we definitely would. But I want to be mindful of Chrissy's time because she is busy, obviously. So, okay. All right, everybody, thank you so much, and I will see you all next time. And Christy, we will do an episode for April too. So yep, again, if anybody has ideas, Chris and I would love to talk about those. So take care, everybody, and we both will see you all next time. Thank you.